Before we get started, just a quick reminder, Sane Enough is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult with a qualified healthcare provider for any health concerns. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, and share Sane Enough across all platforms.
Talking to myself is reality in sight. Inner battles keep me up at night. Sane enough for a new day. Sane enough to find my way. Working on myself, building my name. Questioning doubts, changing the game. Voices are my strength.
Welcome to an impromptu episode of Sane Enough. I'm Coach Eric, and today we're going to go a really kind of strange direction. So I have a high school son, and he's taking a course in which they were doing a podcast, which is kind of funny, all things considered. I'm new to podcasting, and I'm trying to do this. And so he had to interview me and ask me some questions. And I'm sitting here listening to these audio files, and I don't know what they're going to do with them. And what I'm realizing is I've got an episode of my show here. So I don't have the recordings of him asking me the questions, but I do have the recordings of my answers to his questions. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to fill both roles. I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm just going to stick the answer in that I gave. It's not always well thought out. I wasn't prepared for the topic. It was real quick after his baseball practice trying to knock this out. But I think in the end, it's a valuable conversation piece and something I'm definitely going to have to spend some more time thinking about and explore in a future episode. So here is my interview by my high school son with the assigned questions he had from school. I hope you enjoy it. It certainly gave me something to think about. And I think that it's certainly applicable and something we can dive into deeper as this show progresses. But today's not that day. Today we're just going to answer the 4 questions, and then I'm going to ramble a little bit because that's what I do. So, question number 1, as we sat down, was Joe asked me, who were your idols as a kid? Well, growing up, I had varied interests. First and foremost was sports. And I grew up in the Wayne Gretzky dominating hockey, Michael Jordan dominating basketball. Dan Marino was my favorite football player. But first and foremost, I was a Reds fan. So the 1990 Reds, Eric Davis, he was the king of swagger before that was even a thing. It was him and Ricky Henderson. Rob Dibble, Barry Larkin, the quiet assassin. For me, there was tons and tons of athletes that made me want to work hard as an athlete, that made me want to do well. And especially with the Reds players, they were so active in the community. I ran into Joe Oliver at Kings Island, Hal Morris had a Perkins. You saw these guys and they made it feel real, like you could do that. So, that really influenced me. But I liked other things too. Phil Collins was a super talented musician who managed to bridge lots of gaps from pop music to rock. I was a big Pink Floyd fan, and even authors. Shel Silverstein was my favorite author, still is. So I kind of had I never really had an idol. There wasn't that one dude. I didn't want to be Billy Idol, but I liked his music. That kind of a thing. So there wasn't that one guy for me, but certainly, lots of different idols, and primarily I was sports focused. So I would have to say that, my primary idols fell into that category. Okay, Joe's cutting me off there, so he's going to move on here to question number 2. And then question number 2, what he asked was, how did they affect your personality? How they affected my personality? That's a hard question because, when you're a kid and you're growing up, your personality is developing from all kinds of different directions. My grandfather I wouldn't have called him an idol, but he had a huge impact on my personality. He was a headmaster and a teacher and a coach, and he was a very patient coach, but he held you accountable. He was very stern with that, but he wasn't a yeller. He managed to make you feel like you needed to work harder, and yet you were loved at the same time. And that was really cool. And I think that had as much an influence on me as anybody I would have said I idolized. You know, I would have sooner called Eric Davis an idol, but I was never a peacock. I never puffed my chest up and walked around like that. I did want to work hard. I did want to play hard. I did want to play in the World Series someday. But I guess I felt more connected to a player like Chris Sabo, who was a little quieter and also wore rec specs like me, than I did Rob Dibble. But I would have told you all day long, Rob Dibble was more of my hero, but he was also a jerk. He's throwing a baseball into the stands because he's mad, and I never mimicked or acted in that way. So I don't think it had a direct effect on my personality. If anything, it guided me the opposite direction. Seeing these guys do that made me not want to do it. But yeah, I think it just made me want to work harder at what I was good at and what I was passionate about to try to get to where they were. And I never made it, but I had fun trying. Question number 3. Are you aware of the potentially negative gender norms facing men today? Okay, so I see where we're going with this. Honestly, that's a dangerous question because it's automatically associated that if you're talking gender norms, that what you're saying is the negative, the hostile masculinity concept, which exists, but it's not the only issue facing men when it comes to expectations and when it comes to negativity. The fact of the matter is, anytime you apply a broad stroke of what personality should be to individuals, you're taking away their individuality and their creativity and their inner personality. And so if you're saying that masculinity is negative, if you're telling me that trying to be Eric Davis is a negative, but I'm naturally a very high energy, very proud of myself, overconfident individual, there's only so much that you can take away before you're forcing a personality on me that isn't me. So I think it's a really dangerous question. I really do, because it's assuming that gender norms are in and of themselves negative, and they're not. A stereotype is a stereotype because it makes an easily to consume generalized information about a population. Where it becomes a problem is when you start taking that generalized information and creating an expectation that somebody live up to that. And that's where I have a problem with it, whether you're asking me if I'm manly enough, or you're asking me if I'm empathetic enough. I am who I am, and I can get better at the things that are important, whether that be being a stronger individual or being a more empathetic individual. But I don't like the entire question of, do I understand the gender norms that I'm facing? Because I think that it's an implication that what you're asking me is, do I find the idea of being a man dangerous? After ignoring the stop talking sign more than once, Joe finally got around to asking me question number 4. Have you felt the impact or pressure of these norms to be more of a man? Okay, so clearly I jumped ahead of you on this, because this question dives right into the heart of it, doesn't it? I mean, have I felt the impact? Yeah, of course. We live in a family that would be considered the inverse. Initially I was the breadwinner, and my wife stayed home. Your mom stayed home. And then, in 2020, we reversed roles, and now I stay home and work part-time here and there doing what I can. And even just having to qualify that and say that falls into that gender norms. And she's the breadwinner. And, I look at that. Do I feel the impact and the pressure of that? Sure. but I think it comes from all directions. I also feel the pressure to embrace being modern, to be in touch with my feminine side and all of that stuff. And whether you're telling me I need to be more masculine or you're telling me I need to be more feminine, I find all of it to be nonsense. I think we should all be striving to be better people. I think it's the fact that we even talk about it in terms of gender that really is the root of the problem. We're choosing sides where there shouldn't be any. Be a good person. Let's stop feeling pressure to meet any of the stereotypes, and let's also stop hating on the stereotype. I mean, they exist for a reason. As we're going through this, I can't help but think about Al Bundy. 4 touchdowns in one game for Polk High, baby. Growing up, my parents let me watch that show along with Roseanne, and they had very strong concepts that fall into this category. And Al Bundy would be considered like the classic negative masculine male, except I don't think the show celebrated him that way. They weren't telling you to act like Al. They made fun of Al. The whole purpose of the show was they made fun of all of the norms. They made fun of all of the stereotypes, the stereotypical banker, the stereotypical teenage girl, the stereotypical nerdy boy, the stereotypical stay-at-home wife who doesn't actually want to be a stay-at-home wife. That none of those were commentary on everybody. They were a joke. And I don't think they made me want to be Al Bundy. I didn't want to treat women poorly or make jokes about women or look at Biggins magazine because Al did it. It was just a show that opened your eyes to the comedy of everyday life, much like Roseanne did with Blue Collar Life. So you get into these generative normative conversations and gender normative. Look, I can't even speak right. Sure, you don't want me to go back and edit this? You get into these conversations, and I think a lot of times the real danger in them is the assumption that the pressure changes people to be negative instead of just trying to be who they are. And I think that's really the root of the issue here. So yeah, I've felt the pressure. I've felt the pressure to be a man and be able to fix things. But I've also felt the pressure to be modern and put my arm around somebody and comfort them. And as long as it's in moderation to where really what you're doing is being a better person, I don't think we should be looking at that as a gender pressure. I think really categorizing it as such is why we get so sore about it. If we were just talking about doing to others, maybe we wouldn't be having the conversation in the same tone. Either way, I think the issue starts with being sore about the concept of gender. I think we get too tied up in when someone says be a man, we take that immediately to offense instead of looking past it to what they're really saying. To be strong, to be helpful, to lift up your family, to take care of your family. I don't think any of those individual traits we consider to be negatives. Now, there are negative traits that we associate with being a man, but then that's a context issue too. So if I am saying to you, be a man, in demeaning women, then I don't think I'm actually meeting the stereotype of what it is to be a man. I'm trying to apply that stereotype to a negative attribute and trying to justify that by calling it manly. But that doesn't make that part of the masculine personality. That makes it part of somebody's personality that they're trying to justify by calling it masculine. And I think that's two different things. I don't think being horrible to women is in fact part of the stereotype of men, because I don't think the majority of men are terrible to women. I think some men are terrible to women, and lots of people like to apply those some people to the broader population and create a negative gender norm where there shouldn't be one, because we're too busy trying to make it about being manly or feminine as opposed to really focusing on whether it's being a good person or a bad person. And being a strong person shouldn't automatically be a negative, just like being a weak person shouldn't automatically be a negative. But we love to apply those stereotypes to masculinity and femininity. And to me, it's the normalization of making this a gender conversation that really hurts the the conversation because it gets people sore, it gets people upset, it gets them choosing sides. And you don't want people defending something that they don't have a physical control over, their biology, in defending their actions. I think we need to address the actions as they are, as actions, and understand that the stereotype is there to help you get kind of a grasp of the big picture, but it's not there to be applied to the individual. And isn't that concept of what we apply to the individual sort of the root cause of so many of our persecution problems? Whether you're talking about any form of negativity. I was having a conversation earlier with somebody about people being mean in middle school about somebody's weight. And this particular individual went through puberty early, is a little bit heavier set, family's a little bit heavier set, and middle school kids are cruel. So, but that's a stereotype saying that all middle school kids are cruel. That's not really what we're saying. There are some middle school kids that are cruel, and it tends to be more accepted because, well, they're middle school kids going through a tough time. And it tends to be more prevalent because everybody's kind of going through a tough time and they tend to lash out. And everybody's a little bit self-conscious, so they take those comments so much more personally than somebody who has a firmer grasp on their identity would. And the end result is just a cesspool of difficulties that people who are going through puberty and trying to find themselves in this world are trying to navigate, while also trying to go to school, while also trying to play sports, while also doing band or student government or art or whatever their hobby selection is. There's an after-school robotics club at my kid's school. And, this particular individual, she's part of the e-gaming community, which, that's great. That was not remotely a thing when I was a kid. And so, she's free to do those things. My kids are free to do their things. But there's social pressures and norms, and, she's feeling identity questions as to whether or not, she is feminine or masculine and we shouldn't be asking these questions. My daughter at 11 years old shouldn't be wondering if she's feminine enough because she plays sports. She shouldn't be wondering if her friend is truly masculine because she's trying to find her identity right now. None of this should be so stressful to a tween or an early teenager that it carries the kind of pressure and weight that it seems to carry right now. And I think we focus so much on gender when it comes to everything: fashion, role models, behaviors, strengths, personality traits, all these different things. Wearing baggy blue jeans isn't manly. It's wearing baggy blue jeans, and yet we'll call those boyfriend jeans, or we'll call that dressing like a boy. Wearing Carhartts, does that make you a redneck? If you got a Dickies shirt, are you white trash? All of these stereotypes that we associate with consumable identity and with temporary identity. My daughter is tall for her age. She's very slender for her age. That could all change. Now, her mom's 6 foot tall, so it's the tall part probably won't. But it's all fluid. And I think we get so tied up in our identity in that moment and trying to meet the ideal of that moment. There was a time when supermodels were super stickly skinny. And then, there was the baby got back era. And, for my daughter to try to identify with either of those ideals of beauty wouldn't work because she's not built like either of those. So does that mean she's not feminine enough? Does that mean that she doesn't meet the ideals of being a woman? That's silly. One of my sons is very empathetic. He really feels. Make him not manly? No. And yet we'll turn this conversation into, well, does he feel pressure to be a man? Only if you tell him that he should feel pressure to be a man. And only if you ask him if he's got pressures to be a man. Because if you're not thinking in terms of gender, but in terms of traits and skills and personalities and benefits, then it doesn't become a matter of, is it about being a woman or is it being about a man? And I know I'm talking in circles and just kind of rambling and ranting here because I wasn't really prepared for this topic. This wasn't what I planned on doing today, but here we are. So I want people to understand that stereotypes exist, but that doesn't make them negative. That applying stereotypes to individuals is when you get into something negative. And some stereotypes are positive stereotypes. Some stereotypes are negative stereotypes. But it's that application of that stereotype to an individual instead of using it as a broad stroke to get that 30,000 foot view is where we get ourselves into trouble. Stereotypes are kind of like statistics. Baseball is a big statistics sport, right? So let's say someone's batting 300. That means that, 3 out of every 10 times they come up to the bat, they get a hit. Well, if they've gotten out in their last 7 at bats, a stereotype will tell you, well, they have to get a hit here because they're a 300 hitter. But they don't. They don't have to get a hit there because that's not how stats work. That's not how the world works. So you're applying that very specific statistic, 300 hitter, so he'll get a hit here, to an individual in an individual moment, and life doesn't work that way. And stereotypes shouldn't work that way either. We shouldn't be looking at somebody and saying he's a good basketball player because he's black. We shouldn't be saying that guy can't rap because he's white. We shouldn't be saying that girl can't wear Carhartt pants because she's a girl and that would make her a boy. And that boy can't wear a skirt. He has to be a girl if he wears a skirt. No, he doesn't. He can be a boy and wear a skirt. It's a skirt. It's a piece of clothing. Why does it have to be about gender? It can't just be a fashion choice. It can't just be one person is more empathetic and one person is more stoic. We have to say, well, that guy's more feminine and that guy's more manly. That's crazy. We're applying these terms and making an issue out of gender rather than talking about those individual attributes as attributes. They're not gender. They're just personality traits. So this has gone totally sideways. I'm way off the beaten path here, but I just decided, you know what? My son had this project. He had this podcast. He's got to ask these questions, and I might as well put it out there for everybody because why not? It's relevant. It's important. I want everyone to try to be a better person and spend less time focused on gender norms, less time focused on trying to identify. You don't have to have a prescribed identity. Your identity can be fluid. It can change with the moments as long as you're trying to be a good person and as long as you're trying to improve yourself in valuable ways and enjoying life. That's positive. That's good. Be flexible. Be better. Be sane enough. You don't have to strive for perfection, and you don't have to strive to meet a stereotype, and you don't have to hate the fact that they exist. It's all just statistics. So be who you are. Get better at being a good person, and I'll see you next time. I'm Coach Eric. This has been an impromptu episode of Sane Enough.
Phone buzzes, heart starts racing. Another notification. Her stomach twists, she knows the drill. Pure humiliation. It's on their phones, they're at it again. The jokes are aimed at him. A photo he forgot. His future looking grim. They're calling her names, dogging him out. What digital lynch mob's all about. Gotta get that clout, gotta get those likes. Gotta humiliate someone. Fresh meme strikes, zero chill, no empathy. Thirst for fame, another soul gets roasted. Vicious game. When the kids get so mean, it's like a savage comedy show. Every insult amplified, watch the cruelty overflow. They used to whisper in the halls, now it's broadcast loud and wide. Cyber snipes and digital digs, nowhere left to hide. Remember playground squabbles, a shove, a whispered name, a fleeting sting, a quick retort, then back into the game. The bathroom wall, a marker scrawl, a cruel and thoughtless jest, a whispered rumor quickly spread, put friendships to the test. We'd fight it out, then make amends. It couldn't stop the fun. A simple world of right and wrong, where battles could be won. When did kids get so mean? A question haunts my mind. I remember locker room jerks, hallway bullies, and status defined. They'd steal your seats and call you names, acting like creeps. Maybe the good old days weren't okay, but these kids play for keeps. So personal, so constant, post another twisted thread. Worse than a kick to the balls, it's forever on the web. When the kids get so mean, it's like a savage comedy show. Every insult amplified, watch the cruelty overflow. They used to whisper in the halls, now it's broadcast loud and wide. Cyber snipes and digital digs, nowhere left to hide. Screenshots fly and comments burn, the laughter's loud and clear. She tries to scroll away, tries to pretend that it's not real. Loser freak and much worse have branded him today. He shrinks into himself, praying for another way. Now she's hiding in the nurse's office, he's skipping school, considering a permanent solution because of some fool. Some fool. Some fool. Fool. When did kids get so mean? So mean. When did kids get so